So it's now official yesterday. Aaron Rodgers signed his contract officially with the Pittsburgh Steelers after many, many weeks or months of wait. He signs a 1-year deal up to $19.5 million. The base of it's $13.65. $10 million of it is fully guaranteed, and at $5.85 million in incentives with that. So now we have no longer what ifs, maybes. It is for certain Aaron Rodgers will be with the Pittsburgh Steelers for 2025. And how's it going to look? Now, the only thing that Aaron Rodgers for the signing checks off really is just the respectable name and just saying it is a better upgrade than Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. That's pretty much it. If you take the name away of Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers are banking on a 41-year-old quarterback to kind of steer the ship for them and be the savior for this year. And I think it's a very dangerous game that you're playing. Now, putting back the name on there for Rodgers, even with him, there's some questions I have. I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff. That's not what I'm about to say. But you do question a guy who is 41 years old and will be 42 on December 2nd. So you still have some time towards the end of the season. Will turn 42. But still, how much more does he have left? You look at last year and what he ranked statistically, he was good, probably better than maybe some people give him credit for because of, you look at the team record and how far flat, how far down the Jets fell this season, how they fell apart, how it was a complete disaster, coaches, GMs getting fired, controversies every week. So you look at Aaron Rodgers for his PFF grade. If you care about that, overall he ranked 18th in the NFL. Passing grade was 19th overall in the NFL. You look at the season stats, he was 2nd in attempts, he was 7th in dropbacks, he was 7th in passing touchdowns, he was 8th in passing yards, he was 61st in interceptions, he had 11 of them. He was 9th in the NFL for big time throws with 26. So you look at this and they're not horrible. Some of them are top 10 in the rankings with that. So again, even at his age, maybe some people want to bash him a lot as of late, he still put up, again, comparing to other quarterbacks, pretty good stats where you can go, hey, this is still a good quarterback. Is he now the elite quarterback he was a few years ago, the back-to-back MVPs? No, I think that is done. You start to really see that, him slowing down in either 2022, his last year with the Packers, where, of course you lose Devontae, that was a big loss, no doubt. But you saw that it took a little bit of a step back, stat-wise, and the team, they almost made the playoffs at the end of the year, but they had a rough start to the season. And then, of course, fortunately, we didn't see the first year at the Jets because he had his torn Achilles. And you look at this past year, again, record-wise, was brutal for the Jets, and they completely fell apart and fell very short of expectations. But statistically, Aaron Rodgers did put up good numbers. But even with that, there's still some question marks even with the age. I also question about the mobility aspect of it for Rodgers, because you look at last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers for PFF for their final offensive line grades, they ranked the Steelers 27th in the NFL, if you do care about the rankings for PFF, which is horrible. And you're factoring in, now you're going to throw in a 41-year-old quarterback that I don't know how much more mobility he has left in him. Now, I do expect the Steelers' offensive line to be much better than 27th. If they're not, that is going to be a huge, huge uproar with the organization. If you want to put that on the GM, you want to put it on Mike Tomlin, whoever it's going to be, someone's going to get the blame at that point if it does not boost up immensely. So I expect or hope that the offensive line is better than 27th. But as of right now, I'm looking at that right now, and I'm factoring a 41-year-old quarterback who is not as mobile as he used to be. That is something to be worried about. Taken away from Aaron Rodgers, looking at his weapons besides him, outside DK Metcalf, you don't have a good wide receiver too. Now, I thought it would be a great pairing with George Pickens and DK Metcalf, and seeing how that trio will work with Aaron Rodgers. But they decided to move off of Pickens, trading him to the Cowboys, which I do get because he has one more year left in his deal. You're not going to pay him because of the antics, controversy that he brings up. Always a headache for the team. So I understand why you move off of him, but it still leaves a huge void at the wide receiver 2 position. Right now you have on the roster Roman Wilson, you have Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, Robert Woods. These aren't names that people really respect and feel confident in stepping in being the wide receiver 2. Maybe this is Robert Woods a few years ago, you would feel like that. He was a pretty good wide receiver. I think an underrated wide receiver at times early in his career, especially with the Rams. But he is well past his prime. He is a okay wide receiver, good in the spot plays, but if you're trusting him to be a wide receiver too, again, that's a pretty dangerous game that you're playing at that point. So you have that. So you have really no true comfortable or confident wide receiver two to pair up with DK Metcalf, as well as the offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith, who has shown you many times of mismanaging talent. He only got the head coaching job in Atlanta because of Derrick Henry, which is not that hard, just calling run plays. You saw the mismanagement of Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and all the talent they had there. I don't want to throw in Kyle Pitts because he's had problems for kind of his whole career in a way. I don't know if it all stems from Arthur Smith, but if you want to throw on Kyle Pitts as well, young talent he has mismanaged and why he got fired. And now you go to the Steelers, where I feel like it is kind of the same problem as well, where down the stretch with Russell Wilson especially, you couldn't score points. It was more just kicking field goals. And once it got to the playoff time against Baltimore, it was already decided before the game that it was game over, essentially. They were just in over their heads at that moment at Baltimore against Lamar, against Derrick Henry. It was too much for them, and it was pretty easy for Baltimore to win that game because of just the lack of offense they had. Even before that, in regular season, just couldn't score points, couldn't move the ball downfield. So I do look at that. Again, Aaron Rodgers, I would say, is an upgrade over Russell Wilson, no doubt. But again, still with Arthur Smith being the offensive coordinator, how much of a say is he going to have? Is there going to be kind of a battle and kind of controversy between Rodgers and Arthur Smith of what the offense is going to look like? But if you're putting in Arthur Smith's hands, I don't trust it as well. So there's many more problems than just Aaron Rodgers, even though the quarterback position was the main headline because of talking about Aaron Rodgers. And that was a story you kept hearing about, and it certainly was a big issue, and it's certainly a void there's a big void that they filled getting Aaron Rodgers. But there's still many more issues that are underlined that are get overshadowed because of just talking about the quarterback position. There's many more problems I do worry about for the Steelers at this point. Now, with that being said, do I think the Steelers are going to be horrible this year? No. I think they will be what they've been for the last few years. They'll be a team that barely makes it in for the playoffs. Will get you maybe 9, 10, maybe if pushing 11 wins, and barely get in the playoffs. Now, does Rodgers give you, at the quarterback position, the best chance to finally win a playoff game and get to the divisional round for the first time since 2016? Yeah, I think he does. But it also depends on who you're facing. At that point, if you're maybe the 7th seed and barely getting in, you're going to be facing Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City at that point, or how that ever shakes out. But if you're the 7th seed, you're going to be facing one of those 3 teams, seeing how that first seed race goes. That's going to be brutal for any of those teams, for the Steelers, for any of those teams they face. So, but again, I don't think they're going to fall flat. I don't think they're going to completely dismantle. I think right now you look at the structure they have there, it's certainly far, far better than what the Jets are. The Jets are an absolute disaster of what they have in their culture, the front office, and we'll see what Glenn and that regime does. But for Robert Saleh, what they had there prior, it was horrible. And we know Aaron Rodgers isn't really the best leader when it comes to stuff like that. So you already have that structure in place in Pittsburgh with Hayward, Watt, Fitzpatrick, whoever you want to throw in there, Tomlin. So he is in a completely totally opposite spot where he's in a structured place, certainly a more respectable place, even though I kind of bash him for the last few years of how their standard and how they look at things has fallen, going from championships to just barely making the playoffs, but certainly a respectable franchise still. So he goes in that place where it's more structured, more secure. I don't think the antics are going to be as much, though it's Aaron Rodgers and you will get antics regardless, but it's not going to be as much and as bad as it was with the Jets. So I do look at this team as still a team that needs to be respected. I wouldn't go as right now as far as to say feared. I think we have to see a few games or a good portion of the season before I can revisit that and say this is a team that needs to be feared, a team that needs to be really taken seriously. But I do think as of right now with Rodgers, this is a team that it certainly has to be much more respected than before with Rudolph or Howard at this point. But they are going to be certainly in the mix for the playoff contention. For terms of the AFC North, I don't see them winning the division. I've heard some caller say on a 50 sports show that he proclaimed that they're going to win the division. They're going to sweep Baltimore. They're going to split the series with Cincy. That's not going to happen. The Cincinnati and Baltimore I still have right now better than Pittsburgh, even with Rodgers. Before that, certainly they were the 3rd best team. With Rodgers, they're still the best team, or still the 3rd best team in the division. I just trust Baltimore, especially Lamar Jackson right now, more. I trust Joe Burrow more than the Steelers. The defense for Cincinnati is still shaky, and we'll see what happens with that. I do expect that defense to be better, but you look at the offense and that trio they have with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. That is something that's going to be feared, and that's going to keep them in games at that point. And I do think that the Bengals will be better this upcoming season. So if you are too harsh on the Bengals for the defense, maybe you could push the Steelers up to the second best team, but I think right now, or at best, you won't say tied. But for me, I do have them as the third best team in the division. So, with Rodgers, again, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be a respectable team still, no doubt about that. I think they are going to be a competitive team. I just don't know how far they can go with Rodgers. And this is the problem that I've also talked about too prior to this, is just it felt like through the whole process, the Steelers felt like hostages in their own home, where I don't have the facts, the truth of if they were really just begging for Rodgers to come here or they didn't care and they were going either way. But it just felt like that they kept letting this slide for so long of Rodgers kind of playing this game, letting this play out, holding out. And it just felt like the Steelers didn't really stand up for themselves and just give them a deadline. You either sign now or you don't. So that's the kind of part I was a little bit disappointed about. Now it all worked out in the end, obviously with Rodgers signed there, and he will be there for, I was presumed, for camp and all that. But we'll see. I mean, it's also too. I think it keeps running the vicious cycle of scrambling around and finding a quarterback for 1 year, and you start the process all over again. I don't see Rodgers being with the Steelers next year. I think this is a 1 year deal unless they just make a Cinderella run to at least a conference championship or the Super Bowl at that point. I don't see that. I think once the season's done, Rodgers will be gone, and now we're going to be starting this vicious cycle once again of trying to scramble around and find another quarterback. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself because it's still way too far in the future at that point. So so much football to be played that has to happen from now till 1 year from now at this point. So I'm not getting too much into next offseason, but at least sticking to the Aaron Rodgers part of it again. I do think the Steelers will be respectable at this point. I just don't know how far they can go. I mean, certainly Rodgers gives you the best chance of winning a playoff game for the first time since 2016. But we'll see. We'll see how the season plays out. I think Rodgers will be good and have similar stats to what he had last year with the Jets. So we'll see how it all plays out with Rodgers and newly acquired DK Metcalf and how the offense blends together for this upcoming season.